Have you ever wondered if there's a limit to what a person will do for love? I found out there isn't. And that realization cost me my entire childhood. Hello, my dears. My name is Grandma Lorraine. I'm 73 years old, and today, I want to share a story that's lived quietly inside my heart for over 50 years. A story that began in a tiny town you've probably never heard of, Willow Ridge, nestled deep in the countryside of Kentucky, and completely altered the course of my life. But before I begin, I'd love it if you'd do something for me. Leave a comment below telling me where in the world you're watching this from. I'm curious to know, are there others here from Kentucky, or are you tuning in from far across this vast country? And while you're here, please tap that like button and subscribe to our channel. Our little family here on Grandma and Grandpa's Stories is growing fast, and now, you're part of it too. Oh, and don't forget the notification bell, because stories like this don't come around every day. Now, let's talk about what really matters. My parents. My father, Harold, was a simple man. He worked at a small auto repair shop in downtown Willow Ridge. His hands were always stained with grease, but his heart was as pure as spring water. He was the kind of man you'd look at and think, that's a good person. And he truly was. But the problem was, he had a flaw. One that would ultimately prove fatal. He loved too much. And when I say too much, I am not exaggerating. It was the kind of love that hurt to witness. The kind of love that made him forget himself, forget me, forget the world, just to please her. Her, my mother, Veronica. People, if you could have seen my mother in her youth, she was mesmerizing. Tall, with jet black hair that shimmered like silk and eyes the color of emerald fire. A beauty that didn't just turn heads, it made you feel small in comparison. That's the kind of woman she was. Veronica came from a speck of a town in Tennessee, even smaller than Willow Ridge. She arrived with a cardboard suitcase and a story no one could really piece together. People whispered. They said she had been married before, that she had run away, that she had done things a respectable woman wouldn't. But my father didn't care about rumors. He only saw those green eyes, and that was it. He was gone. I was born 3 months after they got married. Do the math. I grew up watching my father humiliate himself for her. And I mean that word, humiliate. She spoke. He obeyed. She asked. He ran. She complained. He apologized even when he hadn't done a thing wrong. It was painful to watch, but it was my normal. I remember one time, I must have been about 8, she saw a dress in a boutique in Louisville. It was expensive. So expensive that it cost more than my father earned in 2 months. I remember watching him count and recount the money he had stashed away in an old coffee tin. I watched him sigh deeply. And then he went to borrow money from his boss just to buy her that dress. When he brought it home in a paper bag, she barely said thank you. She took it, glanced at it, and said, I thought it would be nicer. That was it. My father just stood there with this awkward little smile, trying to hide his heartbreak. But you know what hurt the most? He thought he deserved it. He genuinely believed that a woman like her was doing him a favor by staying with a man like him. And she knew it. Oh, did she know it? Veronica had a dangerous mind. She knew exactly where to press to make my father feel small, unworthy, grateful just to be in her presence. When he came home exhausted from work, she'd sigh and say, Harold, you have no idea what I'm giving up to live in this dump for you. When he tried to be sweet, she'd roll her eyes and say, you're so simple. You really don't understand anything about life. And my father would just take it. Silently. Worse, he agreed with her. I watched all of this and felt a fire inside me. A fury. I wanted to scream. To shake him. To ask him why he let her talk to him that way. But I was just a girl. And back then, children didn't speak up about adult matters. So I just sat there. And watched my father fade. Because that's what was happening. He was fading. Each year, he grew thinner. More hunched. Paler. Like she was slowly draining the life out of him. And the strangest part? The crueler she was, the more he clung to her. It was as if her cruelty confirmed what he already believed deep down. That he didn't deserve anything better. It was a toxic love. A slow death masquerading as devotion. And I didn't understand it until years later. When it was already far too late. I watched my father, Harold, freeze in place, as if his very soul had stopped functioning. He didn't blink. He didn't breathe. The silence in the room was unbearable. It felt like time had folded in on itself, like we had all slipped into a pocket of unreality where no sane thing could happen. And yet, this was happening. Veronica, my mother, had just asked him to do the unthinkable. Not in a moment of madness. Not in delirium. Her green eyes were alert, focused, and terrifyingly calm. She meant it. I want you to take Lorraine as your wife. The words hung there, thick and rotting in the air, and I stood behind the door, paralyzed, feeling like I was drowning in slow motion. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But all I could do was wait for my father's answer. At first, I thought he would say no. I saw the tears forming in his eyes, his trembling lips parting slightly as if a protest was about to form. But then Veronica reached out and gently touched his face. "Harold," she said sweetly. "You said you'd do anything. This is my last wish. My final test. If you love me more than anything, more than your pride, your shame, your limitations, then prove it. Give me this." My father whispered, "She's our daughter, Veronica." Her smile widened. "She's your daughter. She was never mine. You raised her. You fed her. You taught her. I watched. That's all. She belongs to you, Harold. She always has." That was the first time I truly believed my mother was evil. Not damaged. Not cruel. But evil. And I could see, as my father looked down at the floor, that he was in a war with himself. A silent, violent war between the sliver of himself that still had a grasp on reality, and the much larger, broken part of him that would do anything to hold on to Veronica. Even if it meant destroying the last good thing left in his life. Me. The silence broke when he stood up. Just like that. He rose from the floor, walked to the window, and stared out into the dark Kentucky fields. Veronica spoke again, softer now, as if reeling him in with invisible hooks. "If you do this," she said, "I'll know my death meant something. I'll know I was truly loved. Not like the others. Not like the men who lied to me. You'll be the one who proved his love." I held my breath. My entire body ached with fear. I prayed to a God I wasn't even sure existed. "Please," I begged. "Please don't let him say yes." My father finally turned around. His eyes were red. His face pale. And his lips were trembling. "I need time," he whispered. Veronica didn't answer. She just smiled, closed her eyes, and lay back down as if that was all she needed to hear. Because she already knew. She had one. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat curled on the floor of my tiny bedroom, shaking, trying to process what had just happened. I didn't know if my father would go through with it. I didn't know if there was still enough of the man I remembered to stop this madness. All I knew was that my life, the little girl who once swept floors and folded laundry and hoped things would get better, was over. The next morning, the air in the house was so thick you could taste it. My father avoided my eyes. He didn't speak to me. He didn't speak to her either. 3 days passed. And then, he knocked on my door. "Lorraine," he said softly. "Can I talk to you?" I was sitting at my desk pretending to write in my journal, but my hands were too shaky to form letters. I didn't answer. But he came in anyway. He sat on the edge of my bed like he used to when I was little and had nightmares. And for a second, just a second, I saw the man I used to adore. The man who used to sing while changing spark plugs and bring me sunflower seeds in his lunchbox. But that man was dying, just like Veronica. Just slower. Your mother, he began, she's in pain. Her mind isn't what it used to be. I didn't say anything. He looked at me with those desperate eyes. I would never hurt you, Lorraine. You know that, right? I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him. But there was something else in his eyes. Something hollow. Something surrendered. She needs to believe I love her, he continued. And I do. I've always loved her, even when I shouldn't have. Even when it made me into this. He paused. I can't say yes to what she asked. I know that. But I don't know how to say no either. She'll die thinking I failed her. My voice cracked. Maybe that's what she deserves. My father looked like I had slapped him. Don't say that. Why not? I snapped. She's destroyed you. She's tried to destroy me. What more proof do you need that she doesn't love you, Dad? That she never did? He stood up, trembling. Don't call me that right now. I can't handle it. And then he left. Just like that. That night, I heard them talking again. She was laughing. He was crying. And I knew something was about to happen. The final test was coming. And it would be worse than anything I could imagine. Veronica, he whispered so softly that his voice was barely audible. You can't be serious, she laughed, a quiet, almost tender laugh, as if he'd just told her an innocent joke. Of course I'm serious, my love. I've never been more serious in my life. My father stood up from the bed and began pacing back and forth in the small room. His hands were trembling so violently he had to interlock his fingers just to try and control them. I had never seen a person in such despair. Veronica, she's my daughter. My daughter. Do you understand that? I can't. I would never. Yes, you can, she interrupted him coldly. Her voice had hardened like ice. You can, and you will, if you really love me. But this has nothing to do with love. This is. He couldn't even finish the sentence. He just stood there, gesturing at the air, trying to find a word that could describe the horror of what she was asking of him. What is it, Harold? Veronica asked. Her voice was now dangerously calm. It's a crime. It's a sin. It's wrong. It's all of that. It's all of that and more. So what you're telling me, she said slowly, is that your morality means more to you than your love for me? The question dropped like a bomb in the room. My father stopped pacing and stood frozen, staring at her with his mouth slightly open, unable to answer. Is that it, Harold? After 20 years together, after I gave my entire life to you, after everything we've endured, you're going to deny me this because your Christian morality is more important than I am? Veronica, this isn't about morality, he whispered. It's about basic human decency. Rose is my daughter. And I am your wife, she shouted suddenly, and the scream came with a force that seemed impossible for such a frail body. I'm the woman you swore to love above all else. Do you remember your wedding vows, Harold? In joy and in sorrow, in sickness and in health, until death do us part. She paused to catch her breath. When she continued, her voice dropped, lower, more restrained, more dangerous. Well, my love, the time of sickness has come. The time of sorrow has arrived. And now it's your turn to prove whether those vows ever meant anything, or whether they were just pretty words you said in church. My father sank into a chair in the corner of the room. He buried his face in his hands and began to cry. Quiet, broken sobs, like the sound of someone splitting in half. Please, he mumbled through the tears. Don't ask this of me. Ask for anything else. Anything. You want me to take my life? I will. You want me to sell everything we have? I'll sell it. You want me to disappear and never return? I'll go. But please, don't ask this of me. Veronica stood in silence for a long time, just watching him cry. And when she finally spoke, her voice was so sweet, so gentle, it became almost obscene. Harold, my love, my life, don't you understand? I don't want you to kill yourself. I don't want you to leave. I want you here, with me. Beside me, until my very last breath. But I need to know your love for me is real, that it's absolute. That it's greater than anything else. She paused again. I could hear her heavy breathing even from where I stood in the hallway. Do you know why I'm asking you this, Harold? Because throughout my life, I've known many men who said they loved me. Many. And all of them, when the time came to prove it, they failed. They all had something more important than me. Family. Work. Reputation. Religion. Morality. There was always something. Her voice was growing stronger now. Sharper. More passionate. But you, Harold, you were always different. You always told me I was more important than anything. That you'd do anything for me. And I believed you. I bet my entire life on that promise. My father lifted his head from his hands and looked at her. His eyes were red, swollen from so many tears. And now, she continued. Now it's time for you to fulfill that promise. To prove that I truly am more important than anything, more important than your daughter, more important than your morality, more important than anything else in this world. Veronica, he began, but she cut him off. No, Harold. No more discussion. Either you do this, or you admit that you've always lied to me. That your love was always conditional. That I was never truly the most important thing in your life. She took a deep breath, and it took everything in her to say the next words. And if you admit that, Harold, I will die knowing I wasted my entire life on a man who never really loved me. And that pain will be worse than any cancer. My father didn't say anything for a long time. I could see the terrible war raging inside him, between the diseased love he felt for her. And whatever little fragments of decency were still left inside him. I stayed outside the room, frozen, my back pressed against the hallway wall. My whole body shook, not from cold, but from the understanding that I had just heard the end of my childhood as I knew it. I couldn't see my father's face anymore, but I could hear the sounds, low, guttural, stripped of language. Veronica had taken everything from him. Everything but that one last thread of humanity. And now she wanted that too. He didn't respond for a long time. There was just silence, except for the occasional sniffle, the sound of tears falling onto his trousers. Then finally, he spoke. Okay, he said. Barely a whisper. Just one word. Veronica inhaled slowly, and I could almost imagine her closing her eyes in satisfaction. Like a predator that had waited years for the final surrender. Say it again, she demanded softly. Okay. I'll do it. He didn't cry after that. There was no drama left in him. Only emptiness. And that's what scared me the most. The next morning, he wouldn't look me in the eyes. He made breakfast like he always did, boiled eggs, toast, black coffee. I tried to say something, anything, but my voice wouldn't come out. And his silence was worse than shouting. When Veronica joined us, she was wearing a white shawl. White. Like some kind of symbol of purity or mockery. Her face was calm. Serene. She looked victorious. She didn't touch the food. She just stared at my father, sipping tea, eyes locked on him with quiet satisfaction. I need to go lie down, he finally said, pushing away his barely touched plate. Yes, she answered. Rest, my love. You'll need your strength. And then she smiled. Not at me. Not at him. Just to herself. That night, the guest room light was on again. Same as before. Except this time, there was no laughter. No music. Just footsteps. 2 sets. And silence. I stayed in bed, trembling, every inch of me screaming to run, to pound on the door, to break whatever spell she had cast over him. But I didn't move. Because deep down, I already knew. He had agreed. And he was going to keep that promise. No matter what it cost. The days blurred after that. My father's eyes were never the same. He moved like a man underwater, slow, disconnected. He no longer looked at me when he spoke, and he barely spoke at all. Veronica, on the other hand, was glowing. Truly glowing. Her skin looked flushed with life, like she had just returned from a vacation. She hummed while folding laundry. She rearranged the flowers in the living room. She even baked a lemon cake on Sunday, which she hadn't done in years. She looked like a woman who had finally won. And I was just the prize. One afternoon, I found my father in the garage. He was sitting on the floor against the wall, holding a hammer in one hand, doing nothing with it. His knuckles were white from gripping it too tightly. "Dad," I said, approaching cautiously. "Are you okay?" He didn't answer right away. Then, very softly, "You shouldn't call me that anymore." I froze. "What?" "You shouldn't. It's not right. Not anymore." He still wouldn't look at me. I wanted to scream at him. Shake him. Beg him to fight back. But all I could do was ask, "Why are you doing this?" He looked up at me then. His eyes were swollen, glassy, tired beyond belief. "Because," he said, voice cracking, "I made a promise." And then he started crying again. Quiet, tired sobs, like he was emptying out the last of his soul. I left him there. I couldn't bear to stay. That night, the guest room light was on again. But this time, there were no footsteps. Just one long, low moan. A sound I will never forget. It wasn't pleasure. It was the sound of a man dying with his eyes open. The next morning, the house felt like a mausoleum. The heavy silence weighed on me like a physical force. I wandered through the rooms like a ghost, watching shadows stretch across the walls, knowing that something had died between us all. Harold didn't come down for breakfast. His chair at the table was empty, a mute reminder of what he was losing. Veronica, as usual, was already seated, sipping her tea. Her eyes flicked to the empty chair, then back to her cup, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing on her lips. I wanted to hate her for that smile, but it was something colder than hate, something like fear. I waited until she left the room to follow the sound of slow footsteps upstairs. When I reached the guest room door, it was ajar. I pushed it open. Harold sat on the edge of the bed, head in his hands. "Dad," I whispered, stepping inside. He didn't look up. "Please," I said, voice breaking. "Tell me it's not true. Tell me you're not really doing this." He raised his head slowly. His eyes met mine, and I saw a man who had been crushed beneath a mountain of despair. "I promised," he said softly. "And promises are everything." "No," I said, stepping closer. "Your promise was to Mom. But you forgot one to me. To your daughter." He shook his head, bitter tears trailing down his cheeks. "I'm sorry, Lorraine. I'm so sorry." He reached out, trembling, and took my hand. "I love you. But love isn't always enough." I squeezed his hand, not sure if I was trying to give him strength or take it from him. Days passed. Weeks. The guest room door remained closed, but the house seemed darker. I found myself talking to the walls, to the silence, begging for something to change. One night, I woke to soft sobbing. It was coming from the guest room. I sat up in bed, heart pounding. The sound wasn't just sorrow. It was brokenness, shame, and pain mixed together in a raw, unbearable melody. I wanted to run to him, to scream at him to stop hurting, but I was paralyzed. I stayed frozen, listening as the sounds of a shattered man echoed through the house. Then came the day Veronica didn't get out of bed. The illness that had lingered in the background finally took her. She looked peaceful, almost angelic. Harold sat by her side, holding her hand until the last breath. After she passed, something in him seemed to shift. The emptiness that had consumed him began to retreat, replaced by a hollow resolve. He looked at me one evening, his eyes clearer than they'd been in months. "We're free now," he said. I didn't know if he meant from Veronica, from the promises, or from the past. But I wanted to believe we could start again. After Veronica's death, the house felt eerily quiet, but not peaceful. It was like the calm after a storm, a silence that screamed louder than any noise ever could. Harold barely spoke, moving through the rooms with slow, deliberate steps, as if each one was a battle won or lost. I tried to reach him, to find some part of the father I knew before all this nightmare, but it was like talking to a shadow. His eyes were distant, filled with a hollow pain that no words could touch. One evening, I found him sitting by the window, staring out into the dark yard. The moonlight painted his face in pale silver, emphasizing the deep lines of grief etched there. "Dad," I said softly. He didn't turn. "I don't know how to fix this. I don't know if anything can ever be fixed." He finally looked at me, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of hope. "Maybe," he whispered. "But it will take time." The truth was, none of us knew what to do with the shattered pieces of our family. The promise that had shattered more than just hearts had left scars deeper than anyone could imagine. Days stretched into weeks. I stayed quiet, watching Harold slip further away from the man he once was. Then one night, I heard a soft knock on my bedroom door. It was Harold. He looked tired, but something was different. Determined. "Lorraine," he said, voice hoarse. "We need to talk. Really talk." For the first time in months, I nodded. He sat down beside me on the bed, and the words began to flow, painful, raw, and honest. He told me about the weight of his promise, the guilt that chained him, and the hell he lived with every single day. "I was lost," he said. "I didn't know how to choose between what I owed your mother and what I owed you. I was trapped." Tears welled in my eyes as I listened, understanding finally dawning between us. "We have to find a way out of this," I said. Harold nodded. "Together." That night marked a fragile new beginning. A journey neither of us knew how to navigate, but one we had to try. After Veronica's death, the house is filled with heavy silence and grief. Harold, the father, becomes withdrawn and broken, haunted by the consequences of his past actions and the painful promise he made to Veronica. Lorraine, the narrator, struggles to connect with him but eventually finds a moment when Harold opens up about his guilt and inner torment. They have a raw, honest conversation where Harold admits he felt trapped between his duty to his wife and to his daughter, and that he didn't know how to make the right choice. This moment creates a fragile hope for healing and a new beginning for their fractured family, though the future remains uncertain. Despite everything, I cannot forgive my father. What he did was not just a betrayal of trust or a simple mistake. It was a choice that shattered me from the inside out. I see his pain and suffering. I understand how hard it must have been for him, but that doesn't bring back my childhood, it doesn't erase those nights filled with fear and hurt. I try to be strong, to find some compassion inside me, but deep down, the wound remains wide open. How can one forgive a man who placed his own promises and moral code above his love for his daughter? I still don't know if I will ever be able to let go of this pain. Days turned into weeks, but the heaviness in my chest never lifted. Every time I looked at my father, I saw not the man who raised me, but a stranger haunted by guilt and shame. His tears no longer moved me, they only reminded me of what was lost, my innocence, my trust, and the life I thought we shared. I avoided him, retreating into silence and coldness. My heart screamed for justice, for someone to acknowledge the irreparable damage done. And yet, he remained silent, trapped in his own torment, unable or unwilling to make amends. Veronica's death left a void that no one could fill, but it also left a wound that refused to heal. The home became a graveyard of memories, filled with unspoken words and broken promises. I realized then that forgiveness was not mine to give, at least, not yet. It was a battle I needed to fight on my own terms. Every morning I woke up feeling numb, as if part of me had died alongside my mother. The house was unbearably quiet, filled only with the echo of my father's soft, broken sobs. But no matter how much he wept, no matter how much he begged for forgiveness in silence, I couldn't find it in my heart to forgive him. How could I? He had destroyed me in the most intimate, horrific way. The one person who should have protected me became the instrument of my pain. His love, once a shelter, was now a cage I couldn't escape. I wanted to scream at him, to make him feel every ounce of the devastation he caused. But instead, I withdrew, shutting myself off from everyone. The pain was too deep, too raw. Sometimes, I caught him staring at me, eyes full of regret and sorrow. I wondered if he saw the hatred burning inside me, or if he only saw the shattered daughter he could never mend. I wasn't ready to forgive him. Maybe I never would be. But I knew one thing with painful certainty: my life would never be the same again. Days turned into weeks, and the silence between my father and me grew heavier, like a thick fog suffocating everything. He didn't try to explain, didn't apologize out loud, just retreated further into himself, drowning in guilt. But I needed words. I needed acknowledgement of what he did, a sign that he understood the depth of my suffering. Instead, there was only emptiness. I felt alone, abandoned by the two people who were supposed to be my family. The betrayal wasn't just from my father's actions, but from his silence, his inability to face me, to face what he had done. Some nights, I would lie awake, replaying every moment, every look, every whispered word. The memory of that night burned in my mind like a scar I couldn't heal. Could I ever trust him again? Could I ever feel safe in my own home? The answers eluded me, drifting further away with each passing day. One evening, I finally confronted him. The tension between us had been building like a storm ready to break. "Harold," I said quietly, "how am I supposed to live with this? How do you expect me to forgive you?" He looked at me, eyes hollow, weighed down by a sorrow I could barely comprehend. "Lorraine, I'm sorry. I never wanted this to happen. I was trapped, broken in ways you can't imagine. But you didn't protect me," I whispered, my voice trembling. "You let it happen. You chose her over me." He closed his eyes, a single tear tracing down his cheek. "I was weak. I failed you as a father and as a man. There's no excuse." We sat in silence, two shattered souls tangled in pain and regret. Forgiveness seemed impossible. How do you forgive a betrayal so deep, so personal? Yet, deep inside, a small part of me longed for healing, for a chance to rebuild what was broken, even if it seemed impossible. Days turned into weeks, and the house felt colder than ever. Harold withdrew further into himself, a ghost haunted by his own conscience. I tried to reach him, but every attempt felt like grasping at shadows. One night, I found him sitting by the window, staring into the darkness. The silence between us was deafening. "Dad," I said softly, "do you remember when I was little, and you promised you'd always protect me?" He nodded slowly, eyes filled with pain. "Well, I need you to protect me now. Not from monsters outside, but from the ones inside this house. From the memories that haunt us." He looked at me then, really looked, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of hope, fragile, but real. "I want to try," he whispered. And so, cautiously, painfully, we began to face the shattered pieces of our family, hoping, against all odds, to find some form of peace. The days that followed were filled with long, difficult conversations. Harold confessed his guilt, his regret, the unbearable weight he had carried silently all these years. I told him how betrayed and broken I felt, how the trust between us had been shattered beyond repair. But slowly, in those raw moments of honesty, something began to shift. We weren't just father and daughter anymore, we were two wounded souls trying to understand each other, to heal what could still be saved. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. I wasn't ready for that. But it was the first step toward it. The first fragile thread of hope woven into the darkness. And sometimes, that's all we have. Nights were the hardest. Silence filled the house like a thick fog, but inside, my mind was a storm, memories, anger, confusion, and grief crashing against each other relentlessly. I wanted to scream, to run away, to erase everything that had happened. But I couldn't. Not completely. Harold remained distant yet present, a shadow haunted by his own torment. Sometimes, I caught him staring at old photographs, tracing the faces of people who once meant everything to him, especially Veronica. The pain in his eyes mirrored my own, and yet, I didn't know if that was enough. There were moments when he reached out, a hesitant touch, a whispered apology, but they felt like drops in an ocean of loss. I wanted him to see what he had done, to truly understand the depths of my pain. But deep down, I feared he never would. Still, life moved forward, or at least it tried to. And I realized that forgiveness isn't about forgetting or excusing. It's about freeing yourself from the chains of bitterness, and maybe, just maybe, learning to live again. Time passed, but the wounds never fully healed. Harold stayed broken, trapped in his own guilt and sorrow, while I carried the weight of betrayal and shattered innocence. I never forgave him, how could I? What he asked of me, what he allowed, tore our family apart in ways words can't express. But in that unbearable pain, I found a strange strength. I learned that some loves aren't meant to be pure or simple. Sometimes they're dark, twisted, and devastating, yet they shape who we become. Veronica is gone now. The house is quieter than ever. Harold is a ghost of the man he once was. And me? I am the one left standing, scarred but alive. I refuse to let their story define me. I refuse to be a victim forever. I speak my truth not for sympathy, but so no one else has to suffer in silence. Because sometimes, the hardest battles are fought not against others, but within ourselves. And that is my story. Thank you for listening to my story. If it moved you, shocked you, or made you think, please consider subscribing to my channel. I share real, raw stories that reveal the hidden truths behind family, love, and pain. Your support means everything and helps me keep telling these important stories. Don't forget to like and share if you want more content like this. And please leave your thoughts or questions in the comments, I read every message. Stay strong, stay hopeful, and remember, you are never alone.